Hello everyone, this is going to be Python tutorial number 1. We're going to go over some very basic Python in this video, and I'm going to start putting out additional videos like this as we go, and they're going to get progressively more interesting and more complicated as we go along. So before we get started, you do need to have Python installed on your computer. If you don't have Python installed, please go and look at the link in the description below. I'll leave a link there showing how to get Python installed. Okay, if you're on Linux, it should be installed by default. There may be some configurations you need to do to make sure you have Python available at the command line, but other than that, you should be good to go if you're on Linux. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure we have Python installed, and we're going to use what's called the Python REPL, or read, evaluate, print loop. Okay, so to do that, we're going to type Python and hit enter. Now, by default, my system will default to Python 3.10, and that's fine as long as you are using Python 3 or later. This tutorial should work for you. We're not going to go into any of the newer features in Python 3, just basic stuff right now. If for some reason this command doesn't work, you can try typing Python 3 directly, and then it should bring up your Python REPL interpreter here. So, and just to note there, the way I exited is I typed Control and then D to exit the REPL. So let's go in there and let's get started with some Python. Python is a programming language, and as a basic requirement for any programming language, it has to be able to do math. So that's what we're going to do today, a little bit of math. And like I said, this Python REPL prompt that we're at now stands for read, evaluate, and print. So it's going to read the number 5 and then print the number 5 whenever I hit enter. If I wanted to add some numbers together, 5 plus 4, okay, and then I hit enter, it's going to evaluate that and print 9. Okay, so we can also assign these numbers to variables. So let's pick the variable a and assign the number 5 to the variable a. And in this case, it's important to realize, in really most programming languages, the direction of assignment goes backwards. Okay, so if we want to assign a to 5, hit enter. Now we print a, we get the number 5. If we want to assign a to 5, we have to do it in this manner. We can't do 5 equals a. Okay, Python won't allow that and throw this error. All right, so we have 5 stored in A. Do we have anything stored in B? No. We get an error if we try to print B because there's nothing there yet. We need to actually store something in this variable or initialize it. And we're going to go ahead and store 4 in there. And so now we have 5 in A, 4 in B, and we can add together A plus B and C. We get 9. Okay. So just so that we're aware too, in the Python REPL prompt, if we press the up arrow, it'll give us the last statement that it evaluated. Okay, and that was a plus b. We hit enter again, we still get 9. Python can also tell you if 2 variables or 2 numbers are equal to each other, greater than, less than, etc. So we'll check for equals first. When we check for equals, we use a double equals sign, and that's to differentiate between assignment and testing for equality. And when we hit enter, we're going to see that, well, A, of course, does not equal B because A is set to 5 and B is set to 4, and they're obviously not equal. But we can check if A is greater than B, and since A is 5 and B is 4, it should be, and sure enough. Same for less than. So A is definitely not less than B, just like 5 is not less than 4, or 5 is not less than 5 either. It's not less than 4. Although this is interesting, if I do press the up arrow twice and I do 5 is less than or equal to 5, the answer will be true because we're checking for less than or equal to. And the same is true with greater than or equal to. And again, we can use our variables here. So A being 5 is greater than or equal to 5. Is 5 greater than or equal to 4? Yes, it is. So that's some simple mathematics using Python. But let's say we want to do something a little bit more complicated. Let's say we wanted to go to the store and buy 3 items. And the items were priced at $10, $20, and $30. And so we wanted to see how much they're going to be all together. All right. So we're shopping around and we break out our computer and do this very complicated math. And we find out that it's going to be $60 for all 3 of these items. Okay, it's like, oh shoot, well, we just did this math, this very complicated long string of math, and we forgot to assign this to a variable. We could push the up arrow, go back here, assign a new variable, and then have it in C, okay, in this variable C. Or we could simply use a built-in variable, which is the underscore, okay? It's a little hard to see there, but the underscore will give us the last result, or the result of the last evaluated statement here, which is going to be 60. Okay, and let's say that we get to the register and we say, okay, well, we have our 60 here, right? Using the underscore, and they tell us, hey, you know, we're going to give you a 15% discount because you bought 3 items, not just 1 or 2. So now we need to figure out how much that's going to be, and we're going to multiply by 0.15. Or let's say they'll give us an 85% discount, right? And then we only have to pay 15%. And so we see it's only going to be $9. Now, what's interesting here is that we ended up with, 9.0, right? Which is before we weren't getting 0.0 whenever we would do any math here, right? Like we could see, scroll back up, all these weren't 0.0. So what's going on there? Well, Python has a set of built-in types, okay? And if you remember, the a variable was set to 5, okay? If we're ever curious about what type something is, we can type the word type and then the variable. And this tells us that this is of type int or integer, okay? Well, what about this 9.0? Well, we can also do type, and we can actually put something directly in there, and as 9.0 and that value, and it tells us, okay, that's a float, which stands for floating point precision, and that tells us that it's simply how precise of a decimal this is going to be, okay? So think of floats simply as decimals. We won't go too deep into that topic today. All right, so let's say that, you know, I thought ahead, or I can rewind all of this, and I wanted to do this math all in one line. And what do we say? We're only going to pay 15%. And then I also set it equal to my C variable, and there we go. Now, what's nice about the REPL prompt is that we can simply type C and get our answer back. But what if we want to do something a little more complicated? What if we wanted to print it and when we're in a program, or start putting things together in strings and whatnot? Well, we can use the print function, which is another built-in function, just like type here. Okay, and we can do print C, and that's basically going to give us the same thing, okay, that we just had there. But we also have, besides integers and floats, we have strings. So I cleared the terminal here, so we can start working on some strings, okay. Now, before we had a equals to 5, and one thing I want to go over before we jump into strings is that Python is a dynamically typed language. So before we talked about how the type of a was an integer or an int, okay? But we can reassign a to a string instead. We call it the letter a. Okay. Now, if we type a, we see that it is of a type string. Okay. There's a whole list of built-in types, right? We saw floats before, we saw ints, we saw strings, and one way to check if a variable is a certain type, or check the type of a variable is to use this type function. And if you want to check if a is a string, you can use another built-in function called isInstance, and we put a as our variable, and we want to know if it's an instance of a string. And the answer to that is going to be true. And let's say we want to see if a is an instance of an integer type, and that's going to be false. Okay, so that's just a quick little way to check the types of the variables that you're using. All right. Okay, so continuing with strings, in A we now have this string called the letter A, and we're going to create another variable with another string, and we're going to put inside that variable the string is the best letter. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to kind of concatenate these, right, or put them together somehow. We want to have the letter A and is the best letter all in one. So one thing we can do is we can just use the plus operator. So we can do, I'll clear this out a little bit so it's easy to see, A plus best. And if we hit that, we see it stuck these two strings together. Okay, we have a little bit of a problem, right? Right here. We expect there to be a space because this is two separate strings, and the word A and the word is are two separate words. So how do we go about doing that? Well, there's a few different ways we can do it. We can use our A plus best again and continue to use the plus operator, except this time we're going to put an empty string right in the middle there, an empty string literal. And when we do that, it's going to add a space between these two strings, the letter A and is the best letter. And we'd enter, and now it looks like a properly formatted sentence. Okay. Now, in keeping with that, there's another way we can do it. We can use a feature called fstrings in Python 3. And what we do is we simply type the letter F, and then we start a string. And what happens is we can use these braces, and we can have we can create a string by inserting variables into it, right? So what we'll do is we'll put A, we'll start a string, we'll put A inside these braces, and then we'll put best in there after a space. So see A in braces, space, and then best. And what that expands to is our string A, okay, this space right here, which is a space right here, and then our string best right there. Okay, so that's just some ways to do it. Those are two different ways to kind of concatenate them. Now, if we wanted to put quotes in the string itself, remember we had the letter A right here, right, as I push up arrow. Inside of our string, we can put single quotes like this. Now, when we print the string, it's a little more obvious that A is a letter, right? And we can also run this code right here again to get our updated string. We can do that just like this. Okay, letter A is the best letter. Now, let's say we wanted to put it in quotes instead of double quotes instead of single quotes. Well, we bring up our string again here. Let's delete these, and we're going to use the backslash. Don't want to hit enter there. Use the backslash quote and backslash quote again. Now I'm just going to move this over a little bit so we can see what we're doing here. The backslash operator escapes the sequence, so we're not going to have we're not going to interpret this quote as being a quote that ends the line, right? Because what if I just want to add these single quotes? Let's just try this and see what happens. First of all, it's going to complain about a syntax error because what we're doing is essentially we're creating this string right here, and then we're putting the letter A here, right? Because this quote right here closes this quote for the string. So what we need to do instead is we need to escape these quotes. And now when we strike the A key, we'll see that the letter A is in quotes. And again, we can format our full sentence like so. Okay. All right. So I want to go over, let's see, one or two more things. When we have strings, we can format them using the print statement again. Okay. So if we have, for example, let's say we want to print an address. Okay. I can print my address is like so. Okay. And I could say, let's see, 1 Main Street, Boston, Mass. Okay. But what if I wanted to put it on separate lines, like it's a address on an envelope? Well, instead of having this space here, I can replace that with a backslash n. And what backslash n does is it puts a new line character in there. So it'll do like a character turn for the next line. So we hit enter, and we see my address is, new line, 1 Main Street, Boston, Mass. Well, it's still kind of not right. I want to actually have Boston, Mass on its own line. So I'm going to put another backslash n. And notice how there's no spaces in there, right? If I added a space, it's going to look a little funky. See that? Okay. So we have our nice little address there. Now, what if I wanted to move it over a little bit and show, hey, shift this 1 Main Street, Boston, Mass over a little bit, like it's in the center of an envelope? Well, I can do the new line character, and then I can do the tab character with a backslash T, like that. And this will move them both over one tab space. See that? Okay. So that's how that works. Now you say, well, geez, this is really complicated and messy. Can I just, print exactly what I want? And the answer is, well, yes, of course you can. What we're going to do for that is we have our print statement here, and we're going to have 3 quotes, just like that. We're going to leave it wide open. And see, now it gives us this triple dot. And all that triple dot says is basically, you're not done yet. We're not going to read and evaluate what you've done just yet, because clearly this syntax, the way you've typed it, shows us that you haven't finished your work yet. So I'm going to type my address is, I'm going to hit enter again. I'll get another 3 dots. And I can move this over like I wanted to do before. 1 Main Street, hit enter again. A couple more spaces, Boston, Mass. Okay, there. Now I'm done with my string. This is exactly how I want it formatted when it's printed out. So I'm going to use my 3 quotes, okay, to close that up, hit enter, and this is what I get. My address is, with their 2 spaces right here, Boston, Mass. Okay. So that's just some ways to format strings there that you can use. One of the final things I want to go over is using string indices. Okay, all strings are basically formatted into an array or a list, and you can get single letters or groups of letters from each string. So I'm going to define 2 strings. One's called first. I'm going to put Bob in there. And the other one's going to be called last. I'm going to put Sacamano in there. Okay. This is my friend Bob Sacamano. And if I just wanted Bob's initials, I can do first, and I can use brackets to get his first initial of his first name, B. And I can do the same for his last name. Now, I use these brackets and I use the number 0 because all these lists start counting at 0. So even though we're trying to get the first initial, we actually want the 0th index. If I wanted to get the second letter of his name, of his first name, I would use the number 1 in there, and I would get O. Okay. So let's say Bob is filling out a form and he needs to put his social security number in there. Okay, so Bob's social security number is going to be this right here. Okay, 9 characters, starting at 0, ending at 8. Okay, so if we look at this though, we can see that this is your typical Social Security number formatting, 3, 2, and 4. And in a lot of forms, they only want the last 4. Okay, so we're not going to enter that. We're going to make sure that we still just have this as our SSN. All right, and we want to just print the last 4, right? And this last 4, like we said, is 5678. So in order to do that, well, if we start here, this is going to be the 0th point, and I did this on purpose so it'll be nice and easy and not confusing. So this is the 0th number of his Social Security number, the first one in the 0th index. So we count over 1 or 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. So we want to start at 5, and we want to print everything else. In order to do that, we can't just do SSN 5, right? We could do SSN 5 and then SSN 6 and so on and so forth. Or we can just put a colon after the 5. And what this tells Python is start at the 5th index and print everything else all the way to the end. And there we go. We have Bob's last 4. But we said, well, geez, I have to count over. Like, what if I always want the last 4, and maybe I'm not using a Social Security number that's exactly, 9 numbers or 9 characters. How do I do that? Well, instead, just because the way that we started here is we started on the left at the beginning, and we went over 5 places. So now, instead of doing that, we're going to start at the end, okay, and we're going to go back 4 places, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're going to do -4. So we're going to start at the end, go back 4, and then print everything else that was in front of it. And there we go. We have the same answer, okay, the last 4 of his Social Security number. So it's nice that you can start either from the beginning of the string or the end of the string and work your way forward or back. Now, what if I just wanted his middle 2, right? Which should be, what is it, 3, 4, right? What if I just wanted the middle 2 of his Social Security number? Well, I could take something like, well, since it's Social Security number, we know we can start at 0, 1, 2. We can start at the 3rd or index number 3, right? Or the 4th character, index number 3. So you do SSN 3. Okay, so we have that, but like I said, this colon operator prints everything else, right? It says, all right, start at index 3 and print everything else. But we only want to print 2 things, okay? So we think, okay, well, maybe we can put something in here to help us with that. And so what we can do is we're still operating on indexes. What we want to do is we want to print the 3rd index and the 4th index and not the 5th one. Now this is a little confusing, but what we're going to put here is the number 5. And the reason is that Python sees this and says, okay, I will read starting at 3 everything until, but not including, this 5th index, okay? And then sure enough, we get 3, 4, all right? And something that comes in handy with this a lot is figuring out the length of the string first before you start manipulating it. And in order to do that, you can use the len function, okay? And that will tell us that the length of the SSN string is 9. Okay, so that's all we have for today. Went over some integers, integer types, and some comparisons, and some strings as well. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and check back for more again in the future. Hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.